So when I visited Israel some years ago, I felt really at home there. Well, one reason was because Israel, certainly Tel Aviv, had the energy and the old, shorter buildings of the Hong Kong that I grew up in the 1960s and 1970s. And it had that fantastic energy. So I felt very much at home there. But also, in the Arab market, it was very strange, but also strangely familiar. And I really like not knowing whether my father's father was an Arab or a Jew. Because then when I meet Arabs and I meet Jews, I can imagine that I might be related to them. Now, in terms of my Chinese grandma, it also stops there because she was born an orphan. So, I might be related to you. I might be related to one of you. It's very exciting. I like that feeling. Now, bloodlines are one thing. Culture is another. It's an interesting difference. Culture is an evolving process. When we only lived in villages very far from each other, we didn't have to worry about cultural identity. But it was only when people, adventurers, left their villages and started to visit. And sometimes those visits were very violent. But since that time, it's almost as if we need to articulate who we are and where we come from. I wrote a show about my cultural identity. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember seeing that show. It was a show I created in Hong Kong. It was in 1998, and I called it Face, 真面目. I was commissioned to write this in 1998, but this was the year after 1997. Do you remember? How many of you, well, of course, you will have been born by 1997, yes? But how many of you were actually adults, teenagers, grown-ups? If you were sort of old enough to remember, 1997 was a very, very exciting and complex time for all of us as Hong Kong people. In 1997, many Hong Kong people were asking themselves, what does being Chinese mean to them? And is political affiliation the same as cultural affiliation? Those were the questions being asked. And it made me smile to know that my Chinese friends were going through this process of questioning their identity. Because, you see, when I was growing up, I was confused most of the time. And my Chinese friends were not. They just said that they were Chinese and not British. It was simple then. As a Hong Kong Eurasian, 三代都係香港人喎. It wasn't so simple. 香港人，我係香港人. But I've had to put up with people saying, 哇，咁得意嘅，你識講廣東話啊？你喺邊度嚟㗎？如果我唔見到你，我仲以為你係中國人添。哎呀，激死啊！但係你要明白嚇，我一日咁樣聽到咁多次，會影響我嘅歸屬感㗎嘛？係咪啊？你要明白呢啲嘢，係啊。So when my face, 真面目, it was called 真面目, was commissioned by the Hong Kong Arts Centre for their Festival Now, 98. The theme of the festival was Invisible Cities. The introduction to the program said that the choice of this theme is an artistic investigation to bring into focus the invisible side of our community, which has long been living a shadowy existence. So in 1998, I came out for the Hong Kong Eurasians. I told stories of growing up here. I told stories of going to London and feeling very confused. It was a confusing place for me. I told about how in World War II, many people fought in the defense of Hong Kong, especially our Eurasian volunteers. They were beautiful, bright young men, and they fought so hard to defend Hong Kong because this was their home, this was their land. And yet their place in the community here was not clear. It was not clearly recognized. There was no open acknowledgement or true welcome for Eurasians at that time. 蝙蝠如鼠猶如禽，日凄古廟，夜入林。有誰知道蝙蝠苦？受身藏着鳥兒心。The bat is like a rat and a bird. During the day it lives in the ancient temple. By night it enters the forest. Who knows the bitterness of the bat? Within the body of a mouse, it has the heart of a bird. My cousin wrote that in 1955 about his identity as a Eurasian.